Welcome to the Directors UK podcast. We're the professional association for UK film and TV directors. No matter the format, no matter the genre, our featured directors share their approach to the craft. We hope you enjoy.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. For those of you who don't know me by now, I'm Sean Thomas, the Career Development and Skills Manager at Directors UK. Firstly, I'd just like to introduce you to Sophie Hallett, the Chief Operating Officer at the Casting Directors Guild, who we partnered up with to deliver this masterclass. So, Sophie, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everyone. Just really quickly to say very warm welcome to the CDG, and it's wonderful to be working with Directors UK and Sean on this. Thank you so much for putting it all together, Sean, so beautifully. And a big thank you to Dionne, Joelle, James, and obviously our wonderful Aisha. So I'm sure that I'm really excited about this, and I'll be here for the whole session. So really looking forward to it. Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks a lot, Sophie. Just echoing Sophie a bit there. So I'm really excited to welcome everyone, Joelle, Aisha, Dionne, and of course our moderator for this evening, James. I'll now let James get things underway. Enjoy.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks very much. Wow, this is amazing. Casting, critical to all of us. And so delighted to have here Joelle Mae David, who directed Queenie, Dionne Brown, who is the lead actress, who can be with us till 6:30, and of course Aisha, who cast the drama. I think maybe the first thing we should do is just very briefly, Joelle, can you just tell us what is Queenie? I mean, what's the story? It was 8.5 hours, I think, right on Channel 4, wasn't it? But briefly, what's
Yeah. So it's 8.5 hours. It's a comedy drama about a 25-year-old Black woman of Jamaican heritage in South London, going through the throes of a quarter life crisis, who we literally meet her as she's breaking up with her boyfriend of a few years, and that sends her spiraling. Once she starts spiraling, it starts to unearth maybe some deeper trauma that actually has nothing to do with her boyfriend, but it's come up in her life in all these different ways, and we kind of see that come to a head throughout the series. So some really light moments, but some really dark moments as well. It was based on Candice Carty-Williams' novel of the same name, and it's to me very similar to the book. It's just we think we breathed a slightly different life into it, but very, very hugely popular book. So absolutely no pressure for me, Dionne, and Aisha at all.
Well, thank you. That's great to know Queenie and get that summary. Aisha, let's just jump straight into casting. As a casting agent, how did you get involved in this project, and how did you respond, if you like, to the scripts?
So as a casting director, I got involved. I met them. I had a Zoom meeting, and I think they were meeting numerous casting directors, and I was lucky enough that they sort of responded to what I said and wanted to work with me on this occasion. It was a book that I knew really well. It was a book that I really loved. So I was really passionate about it. And I hope that sort of like shone through in my meeting. But, I was also quite honest that, and they were as well, that we didn't think that the lead Queenie sort of existed easily for us. It wasn't like this is definitely this actor. So we were like, this is going to be a big challenge. So sort of get ready. And also it's going to take us some time.
And when you read a script, because it's important that directors realize that already the casting agent is who's going to be so central to providing shortlists. I mean, there's a lot of actors out there, so you're kind of filtering, aren't you? When you're reading a script like Queenie, are you already thinking, "Gosh, that's a problem role," or that I've definitely got names in my head for this role, or whatever? I mean, is that what you're doing when you're ciphering a script?
I think that's definitely what you're doing from the beginning. When you get something, you're sort of reading something and kind of sometimes getting really excited about who people are, who people could be. But I think as well, when I usually take a job, it's because I don't know. And I find that really exciting. because it's if you're a bit scared of it, I think you should do it. So
what was it? So that's interesting, because what was it in Queenie that made you scared?
well, we didn't know who Queenie was, and and it's a beloved book, so you're always sort of worried that you're going to do this adaptation, and people aren't going to resonate with it as much as they did with the sort of source material. They'd added a new character, a new love interest, so it was like, who is he? So yeah, there were lots of parts of it where it was like it didn't feel very clear. And that's why a lot of it is quite funny, because the actors were there and they existed within the system, but we had to go on that journey.
Well, we'll go into that in some detail later, but that's interesting. I think, as a director myself, yeah, it's definitely interesting how casting, I think everyone brings their own image of who they think that character is, and ignite, if you like, if something gets close to that image. It may not always be the same image that someone else on the key creative team. Joelle, and then we'll come to Dionne in a moment, but you met Aisha when in the process? I mean, was it very early on? And
It
how did
was,
you two get to kind of know each other?
I mean, it was super early on, but I think Aisha, you were there before I was there. So Aisha had done some of the legwork before I had gotten on board. But I think the reason why it was important that Aisha was probably there before me is because it's a showrunner-led show. So our showrunner's input is probably the most paramount to the story, period, because they're characters that existed for her way longer than they existed for me or for Aisha. I agree that Queenie felt not easy to find, even when I've read the scripts, and I had been a fan of the book as well, because there's just a lot of complexities to her. We knew that we were probably going to be looking for an actress that could do lighter moments, but that could really dig deep and go into some of darker spaces. So I met Aisha really early on when we were doing, at that point, recalls, I think. For Queenie, we had to start with Queenie, the main role. Our first kind of point of call was, we got to get our Queenie, and from our Queenie, we could kind of start to look at everybody else, because she was so paramount to the story. Like, I think I worked out that she was gonna be in my episodes, at least, in every scene, apart from maybe like 3 or 4. And we had to, like, during script development, write those scenes in to give our actress a break because we knew that she was going to be in like every single thing. So we started off with the recalls for Queenie, and I just want to say that it was a very nervous room when people started coming back for that role. So yeah, pretty early, but Aisha was on board before me.
And how many actresses did you call back? Obviously, Dionne was one of them. Recalls. How many were you recalling?
How many would you say there were, Aisha?
At that stage, quite a lot, because it really was really near the beginning of the process. So all we've done so far is do an open call. We got a lot of responses. We got about 2,000 responses.
Oh my goodness.
We got 500 tapes.
Wow.
But in those responses, because it's a book that is, people have resonated with all over the world. Some of those people weren't from the UK. So then we got 500 tapes. And then from that, we went through. So Dionne was there from the very beginning, but Dionne was there. Joelle was there from the very beginning. But that was the first recall of like lots of recalls. So I think probably we would have recalled like 30 actors for that role over the period of looking for Queenie, because they all had sort of bits of that felt right for the role, but it was finding that person. But Dionne was in that first recall.
Yeah.
Dionne, for you, what's it like being, because I think it's quite important that directors, partly on a well-being front, about what it is to be an actor going up for something, and that terrifying and sometimes very insecure process that you're not quite in control of, obviously. What was your journey from first hearing about Queenie to getting the role?
So I'd initially heard about it whilst I was wrapping up the project I was shooting before, which was Criminal Record with Apple TV. And I'd met Candice that same year because when I booked Criminal Record, I was final rounding for 2 other projects, and one of them was Candice's last project, which was Champion. So the casting call was open, but I heard about it through means of my agent because I believe I basically just requested to tape, just like, you know, they've asked you to make sure that you tape for this as well, which I was like more than happy to do, of course. I'd heard about the book prior to taping, but I hadn't read it. It was just like one of those books that was doing a big round whilst I was at drama school, and in drama school, my reading list was so long, I genuinely just like hadn't gotten to it. So once I got asked to tape, I was just like, oh, I'm not going to read it. I am just going to like try to go off of the text that I'm given for screen, because I didn't want the book is obviously so much thicker. There's a lot more going on there. I just didn't want it to influence my work on camera too much. So I heard about it once the call was opened, and then therein I sent the first tape off. Yeah.
And then what happened?
Oh, sorry. So when I sent the first tape off, we didn't hear anything back for a while, because that was like quite toward the tail end of the year, and everybody knows the industry goes on hiatus for the Christmas period. So that was just like, we sent the tape and my agent was just like, let it go. And I was like, fine, like that was okay. I just wrapped like my first big project out of school. And then I think like end of January the following year, my agent was like, okay, you've been asked to, I'm trying to think, did I tape again, or did I got called in? I think I got called in. I'm sure I did. My agent was like, oh, they've called you in. So I was like, lovely. And like the episodes were still quite under wraps then. So we were just going off of like what we were given, like to prep the scenes. But as Joelle was saying, it's so emotionally dense that it wasn't too difficult to characterize it for me. I tend to have an easier time. It's not easy, but I think as an actor or as a performer, I struggle more with like the levity, that side of text, which was a working note. That was a note that was worked into my recall process, just to try and find just like the comedy of it, which I struggled with because obviously like the character's having a breakdown. So I was just a bit like, I don't know how funny this is, but there's it is funny. There's loads of lighthearted moments and like loving moments in the book and the show. So yeah, I did my in the room recall with Joe, Lisa Walters, who was a producer, and Aisha, and Aisha's assistant. And then the next recall was the chemistry read at Spotlight, and Candice was present for that, along with all of the people I just named. So Joe, Aisha, Lisa, and all of the Queenies were there, all of the Cheskes were there, all of the Franks were there, and we were all just rotating the whole day. I feel like that was something that was supposed to be quite nerve-wracking, but it was actually a really positive space. And then I had to do one more recall with John Pointing, who plays my on-screen partner for the season, and who else did I? It was
so with John Pointing, who's quite a well-known actor now.
Yeah.
What did your chemistry read involve?
Well, we were chemistry,
for example, or anything, or
no, we didn't. The chemistry read that we did, it was our breakup scene.
Oh, okay.
It was our breakup. It was the breakup scene. So, it was dipping back into that, Queenie's. There may be some people in the chat that haven't seen the show, spoiler, but she's, they're arguing, and it's like kind of like tumultuous, and it's the end of their relationship, or the part where he's just kind of telling her that like he just doesn't want to be with her anymore. And then we chemistry read a scene where Queenie's trying to like get him to, like she's trying to get him back. So it was very emotionally dense. There wasn't any levity there. Like it wasn't light. There wasn't much love to play with. It's kind of her yearning to be like, it was her apologizing for like, I guess what she perceives as her harshness. So that was our chemistry read with John. And then, the chemistry reads with like Cheske were like, those were the parts that had a bit more levity. I'm actually struggling to remember what else it was that had levity.
Those who don't know, Cheske is sort of her best mate, isn't she?
Yeah.
played by
Ella.
is a role, yeah, Bella, and so we get to the point of the chemistry read where Dionne's obviously doing great stuff, in the chemistry read and the recall. What's interesting as a case study with Dionne, obviously, is as the lead, you've got quite a powerful voice in the room. This is one for you, Joelle. Candice, who's written a novel, is given the official title showrunner, which is like an American import. But in the very essence of the title, you get a sense of the power that that role has. You're the director. Aisha obviously has a lot at stake because you're the casting agent. How was it filtered that between all those different people, and you've got the producers, I think you mentioned something called Lisa, I think, who are such a critical decision, who gets the lead? How do you, Joelle, as a director, navigate that? Did you just everybody go that this is the girl for the role, or was there debate?
It's a really good question. I think all those people that you mentioned worked quite well in casting. I can only really speak for myself in that what I was trying to do as a director was realize the showrunner's vision. So I wasn't going to do anything like too rogue and be like, actually, I think the character is now this, or it's now this. Like, I wasn't doing that. I was trying to have conversations with her before castings, have conversations about tapes, have conversations about new characters, like always talking. I did a lot of script development as well, so I was always talking and trying to hone in what she wanted for her characters. But at the same time, I would also give suggestions, or I'd also be like, what about this? Or can we try and do this? Or maybe this person in this tape is not exactly what we asked for, but I'd like to bring them in the room anyway, because there's something there that I think I'd like to work with. So it was about having really clear communication between all of us, I think. And also, as much as there was a showrunner present, you can't be like telling them what you think they want to hear the whole time, because then everyone's not working the best that they can be. So I did feel like if I had a difference of opinion, it was okay. And we worked it out, and it would just mean like, okay, she wants these actors, I want these actors, let's bring them all in the room. It's kind of stuff like that. So that was never a problem. I do feel like on those next lot of recalls, because she was in the room, I did feel a bit more anxiety from some actors coming in the room, because like we know, it's a huge book. Candice has also written other books. She's like super well known. So I felt like it was less daunting when the first set of recalls, although people were still nervous, the first set of recalls when it was just me, Lisa, Aisha, and Aisha's assistant. But definitely her presence in the room during the chemistry reads and stuff could be felt. It could be felt like, no, on my behalf, no, like I was very happy for her to be there. Actually, it just meant that we had a shorthand in between takes where we could talk about it and we could hone it and we could refine it, and it just made everything quicker behind the scenes, actually. And again, I just have to keep saying, I was trying to realize her vision as much as possible, but also giving my input where I felt like it was necessary, like we should try this or we should try that. And I think also in those recalls, I was the one giving the direction. I was the one nurturing the relationship with the actors. I was the one making them feel safe and comfortable, even though she was in the room, because it was daunting. So I felt like there was the respect there for me to go ahead and do that. And maybe it meant that I would try something we hadn't talked about, but it was fine, because I like to build off of what the actor is giving me, so that my notes do not feel forced, that it feels like the actor can take ownership of them, and that we're starting from a point of something positive rather than let's just do that completely differently. No, let's start where you are and let's build to where I think we need to be to give you the best possible chance. So yes, very daunting presence, I think, more so for the actors than for myself.
But for you a little bit, just to have that person sort of judging you as much as judging them, like as a director?
No, I never felt like she was judging me, to be honest. I felt like she was quite trusting of me in the casting process. And like I said, I felt like at least with her being there in those recalls, we could have a quick talk about it and I could change up stuff quickly rather than her not being there, which I would have probably found more daunting because I'd be like, oh my God, am I doing what she needs me to do? Am I getting what she needs me to get out of the actors? Because, there's another level above her as well, which is the channels. So we've also got to be presenting them a version of what they want, which also might not be the version that I want or that she wants. It just becomes quite complicated when there's a lot of voices in the room. So the best thing myself, Aisha, Lisa, and Candice could do was to be a unit ourselves. Yes. Do you know what I mean? So we were.
Yes, and obviously, Aisha, you've had tremendous experience of seeing. I'm kind of trying to director orientate it a little bit in terms of like, I remember being very nervous when I began doing auditions, and kind of because it's like, how long are they meant to go on? And I was just so polite. They always went on way too long because I want to say they've learned this off by heart. So they should have 3 goes at it, even though it was obvious from the first go they were never going to get the role. So we'd fall behind. For you, Aisha, watching directors at work, what do you feel is the priority as a director who's obviously running the creative side of the audition, I suppose you could say. What would you say are the key elements to make a successful go at running the auditions as a director?
I think it's really fascinating because I don't think all directors are actors, directors, let's say. That's not where they're coming from it. And that is absolutely fine. But in that situation, obviously, of casting, you need to be so you need to find a way in and a way to communicate. And I think it's really helpful when you can just be quite clear with the actors. I think sometimes people over-explain.
Yes.
And you can massively see just an actor being very confused by a note that they've been given. And, the actor is there to help you tell this story. They just need to know, what would you like them to do? And even if it's, I don't know, you bring what you want to bring, which is a lovely thing to do, then just say that. And then you can sort of play together. I think definitely sometimes people the auditions are over long because people don't know when to stop. And there's it feels really lovely when a director knows that just do it a couple of times and to sort of, you're not going to get everything from this sort of 20 minutes with an actor. You're just going to get a sense of what they could do and what they could bring to this role. So what is really important to you? What do they need to do to show you to play this role? And then how do you feel like you've got that or the start of that? Like, don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but I often say like casting's like betting. Do you know what I mean? Like you take a risk and then, and you see and you hope that that's the right person. But I think with communication, and if you believe that that actor is the right actor, you're going to get there, but you don't get them to read the whole script. So I think those are the things that are things that you can do.
Yeah, great tips. I'm going to take them away and use them. So you've cast Dionne as Queenie. That's great. Everyone can relax. Always great when you've got your lead, because as you say, you can then start placing contrast, color, the collage of the piece, if you like. It's like a collage, isn't it? All the different roles. Key, who's going to play Cheske, who is Queenie's best friend. And that's an interesting story because it's rather unconventional way of casting Cheske. How did you find Cheske?
Well, I think Aisha found her. She was one of the tapes that I was given to watch. I thought she was just brilliant, just really natural. And she gave quite a lot in her tape, which I find tapes difficult sometimes. Because I just need to see something and I love being in the room. I love working with actors. And I had to, and just to go back to what Aisha said, with not all directors are actors directors, and I have to say I had to learn to be one, because I never went to film school or anything like that. So honestly, I just like pretty rogue, just like made loads of stuff and kept learning as I went. But working with actors, I was used to be quite nervous about. But then I realized I really love it. So we got her back onto a recall. I wonder, was the recall on Zoom because she was in America? Just trying to think. I think maybe she was in America. We did a recall, and then she came for the chemistry reads, and then I think we had to do one more recall to kind of get her over the line with the channels, because like I said, there's a hierarchy. So it's like
you had people at Channel 4 also
yeah, have
feeding in.
wanting a say.
You've
Yeah,
got the showrunner, you've got your
yeah,
producers, you've got your Channel 4 commissioner.
yeah,
You got
yeah,
just a lot of people to sign off on these roles. Yeah.
yeah,
And being a director, it's critical that somehow you have to remove your ego from that, don't you? Because you
yeah.
actually might favor X, but in the end, there's quite a lot of voices
I
pushing.
think it really depends. I think it really depends if you really believe in something and you also have the showrunner, which is great if they believe in that person too, then it's worth fighting for. Do you know what I mean? So I think like I'm okay to be put in front of a channel and fight.
You do have to fight.
Yeah, sometimes you have to fight for some people. And this is all happening behind closed doors. Like the actors would not like be privy to this in that sense. They might be aware that they're out of like down to like the final two or whatever, but they won't know that we are talking to channels about them in that way. But Bella was someone that we felt really passionate about. I think what was difficult about Bella's initial recall was that it was over Zoom. So it was a bit harder to maybe do what I needed to do with her in the room. But then
She's not an actress, is she? She's not.
no, she's not an actress. She's not an actress. She's a singer. She's a singer.
So you were going to a singer to play one of the key roles in Queenie. So
Yeah.
did she have acting work that you could show or nothing? Just
I
had
don't think she did she, Aisha?
No, she hadn't.
So Bella is you're trying to persuade? Was there much persuasion needed to get Bella the role?
There was a little bit of persuading. I think it's because we had a lot of different channels on board. We had Disney, we had Lionsgate, we had Channel 4, and they all had a say in casting. And I think we had like two that were cool and one that was like, I'm not sure, their favorite was maybe somebody else. So it was an opportunity for me to work with her again, which had to be over Zoom again because she's a singer. So she was abroad doing singing stuff. But this time I was armed with the notes that the channel wanted to see in me bring out of her. So in a way, it was my job to get her over the line by doing that. Once she got the part, something I did with Bella that I didn't do as much with other actors, but I tend to do it with people that aren't actors, is I allow them to improvise a little bit more than usual because I feel like it loosens them up, it makes them feel more comfortable, it makes their performance more real. So a lot of that scene, a lot of what Bella was doing was improvising. So I always say you can improvise, but try to land the lines as well. So we're doing what's scripted, but like improvise around it. So she did that, and then so that laugh at the end, Dionne and Bella's laugh is like really genuine, and I love seeing genuine laughs on screen because you can just tell the difference. So that's kind of my journey with Bella, and she didn't even have an agent, and she had to get an agent after that and stuff. So yeah.
And Aisha, as the kind, I think directors sometimes don't take enough account of how much the casting agent has invested in. I mean, I'm assuming you and Joelle were like-minded about Bella. Are you also like passionately making the case for Bella when there's, let's say, somebody at Lionsgate, somebody at Disney Plus is arguing for choice number two?
Yeah, I think you just got to find a way to articulate why you think it's her rather than anyone else. And, it felt quite easy because we saw a lot of people, we saw a lot of actors as well. And yes, she was a singer and she wasn't as experienced, but she felt that she was exactly the role. And also was really up for working really hard because she wasn't, this sort of trained actor. So we could say all these things to them that like she's very aware that she has some limitations, and these are all the things that she's going to do. So it didn't feel difficult, but yes, we was obviously it's with people sort of in different parts of the world. So people here, people sort of more in the US. So you'd be on Zooms or calls and there'd be like 10, 15 people on these calls.
Never
Sort
had
of-
that. Wow, really?
So it was big, yeah.
People we've never heard of before, right? Or
Yeah.
on like these calls, and I was just like, hello.
And they would these people you'd never heard of, would they all express an opinion, or was some of them just sort of like sitting in because that's what it said they should be doing at this point?
It felt like some were sitting in to see
Yeah,
where the conversation was going, to be honest with you.
yeah. Probably to report back to somebody higher up.
Exactly.
I mean, we've had a question here from Mel, which is basically in regards to chemistry tests. What do you think about having to do one over Zoom? I myself have cast on a couple of occasions. I'd like to see how they work with each other, but one is in the USA, one is in UK. Can this work to put a chemistry test across Zoom with two people in different parts of the world? Is that just too big an ask, do you think?
We did do one Zoom read with Luella and Michelle, but there was just like a few technical difficulties and stuff. And I think real chemistry, you need to be in the room with people because that's how you're going to see and feel how they work together. Because I just think there's something so special about being in the room and bringing actors together and seeing. And it's not even just seeing, but it's like feeling a spark or feeling a comfortability, or slowly, like when we did the chemistry reads for Cheske, Frank and Queenie, it was starting scripted and then going improvised, and then seeing them get more and more comfortable with each other, more and more kind of funny, and more kind of little looks and little kind of body movements and stuff, which I think, oh yeah, that would be great if they could emulate this on screen. I say all that to say I understand it's difficult if you are trying to look at two people in different countries. I think Zoom is better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing, but I would always opt for the room with chemistry for me personally. If you can, then do. Zoom is like, to me, the second option. It's because you've got no other way. I think it's still worth doing.
Yeah, and that's it. I completely and utterly agree with Joelle that I think that in person's best. But we worked on a film this year, and the actor was shooting something else, so we had to do a whole load of Zoom chemistry tests, and you do a split screen. You record it.
Is that what you do?
Yeah. And see if they can fall in love in their boxes. Yeah. And it is, as Joelle said, it's better than nothing. And it does work, and you can cast that way. It's not ideal at all.
Yeah.
But and as Joelle said, technical difficulties.
Yeah.
For some reason, every time there will be some, but it can work, and it does work.
Excellent. So when you were cast, I don't know how many roles you had to cast in Queenie, maybe a dozen or more. I don't know, maybe bigger than that, probably. But let's say 15.
I feel like I was in casting a lot in pre-production.
Yeah. It
was more like 50 rather than 50.
It was. I feel like I was casting about 50 people because the majority of people appeared in the first 4 episodes, and then I think Michaela had to do like the whole flashback episode, which was younger actors of
The
our
whole
family.
there was a flashback
Yeah,
episode of where you had to
yeah,
find the younger versions of, which
yeah.
added a lot of people, and he had to do a
Lookalike.
likeness.
Yes, lookalike. Yes.
Yep, yep. But I remember just being like actually like quite sick. I had a sinus infection because I had just done Dreaming What's Black and I just finished the edit on like the Friday and started Queenie on like the Monday, and like my body just went, no, you can't do this. So I remember being in the casting for Queenie and just being like quite nasally, actually giving directions the whole time. But yeah, honestly, it was probably about 50 people that we were doing.
I think as a director, it's actually quite hard to. I mean, it's interesting you raised that the energy needed, because the actors come in. I know they've learned it, but they are basically inverted commas on camera for the length of the audition. But you have this typed list of names over a certain number of days, which you've got to sort of work through, and it is fatiguing. I think it is a bit, hard to keep that your own chemistry up, if you like, to
Yeah.
get the best out of them because you're on the whole.
And the momentum, isn't it?
Aisha, did you
Yeah.
always attend the castings, or quite often the second in command or whatever will sit in with some casting agents? I don't know whether you, on principle, like to be there for as many as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I really like to be in the castings. I think it's really important to sort of see it myself with my own eyes. But also, for me, it's about, I've developed relationships with lots of these actors over many years. And I think that casting can be quite an intense place sometimes. So, I'm a familiar face.
Yeah.
And that's what and I like to go out and greet the actors, bring them in, and then champion them a bit afterwards and be like, they've done this recently, or do you know what I mean? So I personally like to be there for the whole process.
Yeah. I'm going to read out another question because it's come in, and then we'll move on to the unknowns that you cast, or the non-actors, if you like, that you cast. But were there any roles that brought, during the casting process, really surprising performances? I'm going to direct this towards you, Joelle. And were there certain actors that stood out as particularly funny? What was that like for you to collaborate with people who surprised you and perhaps were funnier than you'd expected?
Funnier than I expected. I think when Joseph Marcel came in, who plays Grandad, was just amazing. To be given direction to an actor of that caliber and to have him be so receiving of it. I don't know if I'm talking about the levity, but he was just a joy to have in the room, and I felt very honored that he would come and sit in the room and audition. I know he was worried about getting the Jamaican accent right because he's St. Lucian, and that was part of the reason for him coming in. But I thought he was lovely. Kai the Kid, who is played by Demi, who I'd worked with on Dreaming What's Black. So on paper, the role is not as funny as he made it. He made it way funnier, I would say. So yeah, and then his scenes with Bella as well, they have the same sense of humor, so they were bouncing off each other, and it was like really great. So I would say he made his part funnier, which was great. So I think, yeah, probably him.
Great. Well, whilst we're talking, I mean, obviously he's one of the most well-known actors that you had in your show, but there were, and then we'll talk about the second director in a minute, but the cast, because there's another clip we can play with this. It's a working with what use did you make of non-actors, or apart from, we've talked about Bella already, was everybody else a working actor?
I think everyone else was. I think when we all were auditioning Queenies, there was a fair few non-actors auditioning for Queenie that had made it to that final 30. They were singers, dancers, performers, who in their real lives and their online presence really gave Queenie energy. But when they were in the room, being able to then perform in front of people and never have done it before, maybe didn't quite work. so it's actually interesting. We ended up going with a trained actor, Dionne. But I don't think any other non-actors were cast.
Right.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, Aisha. I think it was just Bella.
No, and again, for other roles, there were like influencers, and for the role of Frank, there were influencers and musicians and lots of other people seen. But it really was just trying to run just traditional sort of like actors within the system with non-actors, and then sort of see who resonated.
I mean, one of the things is the family unit, you know, her mum, her dad, her sister, her auntie, they're all part of this show. What, go ahead,
I was
Aisha.
just going to say, Cristal, who's her
Oh yeah,
cousin, is a rapper.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
so
So
you-
she's another non-actor who
right,
is in the
right.
show.
Yeah. So
yeah.
you look, what you're saying is you look beyond the acting community to plug some of these roles, and we're very successful at that. I mean, so I think for directors, just to bear that in mind, that may not be the spotlight book, you know, that you think broader, because people now, especially if they're authentic to some of the characteristics that they exhibit in everyday life, they'll project those into their screen roles, and they don't need to be trained at RADA. They can bring something kind of more interesting. I mean, this is a Jamaican family, or originally from Jamaica. How that authentic, the accents, were they all from that part of the world, or did some have to learn the accents? How did that work?
They're
They're all
all
of Caribbean descent.
yeah.
All
Yeah.
Caribbean, right? And was
Yeah.
that a decision you made not to go West African or whatever? You made a conscious decision to stay with Caribbean.
I don't know if we said that actors had to be Caribbean. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Aisha, but I don't think they had to be.
No one said that
Yeah.
everyone had to be Caribbean.
Okay.
They have to look Caribbean, which sometimes people from all parts of Africa don't. So I think the issue is that you want people who know to connect with it and not see someone who they know looks visibly different from what they. So that's mainly it. But yeah.
Within that,
Yeah,
absolutely.
within that, yeah.
Yeah, great. Now we talked about a second director very fleetingly. How much involvement did the second director have in the process? She had an episode to herself in a way, because it was a flashback episode, wasn't there? Where everybody was.
Yeah. I mean, look, when you do different blocks, the first block director ends up doing the majority of the casting, just because most characters appear in their episodes and they continue to appear in the next set of episodes that you're not directing, so you're setting that kind of pace with those actors. But a second block director will be in the casting room if there are characters that appear only in their episodes that I haven't introduced into my episodes. So though they might not do as much casting, they still might do some casting. So for example, Michaela would have cast off the back of us casting the family. She would then need to work off of that to find the younger versions for that flashback episode for 6. I think there was a couple other characters that were new in her episodes as well. So she definitely did do casting. It always depends. I just think most of the time, most of the projects that I've worked on, if you're that first director, you just end up doing most of the casting. But it really depends how the story unfolds. If you have an anthology, you will do your own cast. Do you know what I mean? It really just depends on the project.
Yes.
I've only ever worked on one project where the second block director was there from the beginning.
Wow.
And was in every casting and helped us find that lead cast as well. 3 Little Birds.
That's quite nice.
It was really nice.
That's nice.
To have her there, but it was the only time I've ever had that experience. Usually someone will come on and do just the casting of their block.
Yes.
I think that's a nice way to do it, because it means you're in synergy, you get to talk, sometimes the block 2 director doesn't get any rehearsal time with the actors. So for me, it does make sense to have them, even if they can't be in the room, but they can watch tapes, or they could just be part of the decision making somewhere in the beginning is helpful, because they're also going to have to do 4 episodes with them. just because I'm doing the first four doesn't mean the last four are not as important. And I know with Queenie, my block went over in filming and they lost their rehearsal time. Do you know what I mean? And that doesn't make me feel good. So I am all up for collaborating with directors across a season or a show, because I've done lead blocks, I've also done second blocks, and I learned from a director I worked with who was lead and I was second, and he brought me into everything early, and I just learned from that, and it was so kind, it was so gracious. It was my first TV job, and I got to, even if I wasn't calling the shots and everything, I got to hear everything, I got to see everything, I got to kind of understand the decisions that we're making, and it made me work more in sync with him when I came to my block.
Did you ever think, Aisha, of doing much street? I mean, do you do much street casting with other minority groups like Iranians? Or there's a question here really about this from one of our viewers, Afghans, Iranians, street casting. I mean, do you do a lot of that kind of street casting with less represented communities?
Well, so just with whatever the project, whatever the roles are, you will sort of look for actors from those communities. So I worked on a show called We Are Lady Parts, and that's a lot about, that's quite a specific show about Muslim women from many different sort of backgrounds, and that also can play instruments. To a certain degree, so they can believably be in a band. So yes, in that situation, again, we looked at actors within the system, but we also looked at, we did a lot of street casting, and street casting's many different things at the moment, in terms of like going on Instagram and finding people and following people and messaging them and being like, do you want to be?
Nice.
So we actually found someone for that show, messaging them and being like, do you want to be in a TV show? And then they're one of the leads in the TV show. Or putting out open calls, or just there are many different ways. But yeah, it's something we do all the time.
Right. Oh, wow. So, I mean, actually, it's interesting, isn't it, as a casting agent, how all those avenues have opened up with social media and with Instagram, whatever, where you might find that jewel that you're looking for from the most unexpected source, really.
It's kind of amazing, because when I started doing this job 16 years ago, you would literally have to just go street cast. You would have to like go to an area and go into, like, you go to Brixton, go to barber shops, go to hairdressers, like speak to people, stand on the street, like go to youth clubs, and now, yes, you can also just put it online and it can be seen by so many people so quickly. It's kind of amazing.
And do you cast project, again, another question here, Aisha, do you cast projects that are set in the US as well, or is it like UK work that you do?
You will cast things set anywhere. So again, it's sort of open. Sometimes casting directors from different countries work together because it might be easier. So you might be doing a project that's in the States that you do sort of the leads of, because that's easier to do, those more sort of well-known actors. And then you might say, we should actually ask this other casting director if they're doing more local casting with us, and then work together. So recently I worked on a film called The Substance. I did the UK cut.
Wow.
I did the UK casting for that because it's shot in France. And so it was easier to get English actors to do American accents than it was for French actors. So yeah, we did some casting on that project for them.
Oh, excellent. And there's a question here about, obviously casting has a big say in how you get your movies funded. It's all about cast, even more than TV, I would argue. With that in mind, how soon would you get on board something like getting a film off the ground? I know we'll drift back to Queenie in a minute, and just these questions have come up. They're interesting, really interesting. How soon would you be in order to get that script in front of the right actors to help get the film green lit? Are you brought on very early by the producers, if you like, and the director on a film?
Yeah, usually now we're brought on really early because it's about helping to get the project greenlit. Sometimes cast are really helpful to do that. So we're brought on early, and we're, speaking about different ideas and checking avails and then getting offers out. And because we have relationships with agents as well. We sort of know what people are up to, can advise them on maybe something that, you know, different that an actor would be looking for, and be like, maybe this is someone that you should approach for a role. So now, like at the moment, I'm on like 6 projects in development. So we'll see if we can attach the right actors to actually get them across the line and greenlit.
And I assume sometimes, you know, if it's a debut feature film director, not very well known, probably quite small budget, part of your job is to sort of gently persuade them into doing it?
Well, I think having those relationships with agents where you can be like, this is a really exciting project, a really exciting new director, and yeah, have that. So it definitely is, it's a sell, yeah, for sure.
Right. So on the question of the sell, I mean, it sounds so far, you ladies are giving the impression that there wasn't any major disagreements. I mean, like, would you say, Joelle, that, and we're never going to mention names, we could never do that, we would never do that, but are there any roles you think, gosh, I do think it would have been better if they'd listened to me and we'd cast a particular actor instead of the one that we had?
No, because we got who we wanted. We fought
Right.
for who we wanted and won, so it's fine.
And one, it is like winning. I know what you mean. It's like, you just chalk that one up as a win. That's great. And presumably, did availabilities come into any problematic?
Oh, I think John Pointing was on
John
another
Pointing,
show. He was on
yeah.
Big Boys. So there was days on set where we had to share him. That
Wow.
happens sometimes so luckily I don't think he was filming that far away from where we were filming. So I think in the morning he did Big Boys and then he did Queenie in the evening. So that happened a bit. What else? I think that's the only one really I can think of where availability came into it.
Yeah. And also always scary, isn't it, that last week? Because I mean, it's always lovely when you can have the table read and you've got everybody, but sadly that can't always be the case because you're still hunting. Were you hunting till the 11th hour on this? I'll direct that to you, Aisha.
For our read through, I mean, we didn't have a lot of people at the read through, which is always frustrating, but it's always kind of the way that there's a lot of people reading in. It just is what it is. But I think we were in pretty good shape actually.
Yeah,
before we shot, we did pretty well because I've been in much worse shape than that. So we were really lucky. We just couldn't get people to the read through because they were shooting other stuff.
Yeah, no, I can understand it. It's increasingly harder actually to get people. Somehow when I began, you know, just before the Battle of Hastings, it was much more attended. But I think people now, because of this thing about Zooms and everything as well, you know, they don't see the critical quality really of being there in the room. But of course, also so often they're just not available on the day that you need them to. So now I know for you, Joelle, this is obviously casting's just the beginning of the relationship with your acting compadres. How do you, whilst we have you, you know, how do you work with them to take them forward for the, let's say, Bella or whatever, especially if they're not that much experience? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned to love casting, even though if you are that lead block director, it can be quite time consuming and you know, hard to keep the momentum going. I've learned to love it because it helps me build a rapport with an actor before I get on set. I don't get to rehearse with every single actor before day one of their shoot, right? So I might get some with the leads and I can request some rehearsal here and there, but there's no way in the time that you have in TV that you'd get to rehearse with everyone. So for me, casting is the way I can build a rapport. It's the way I can see how they like to be directed. It's the way I can see how clear and concise I'm being. And if I need to change something about the way I'm communicating with certain actors, like I don't mind doing the work of that actor responds this way, that actor responds that way, that like it does, like I can manage it. So I don't have a set way of talking to everyone when we get onto set, because I've remembered the way that we work together in the casting room. So for me, it is casting's paramount. Like I just did a show where I came in on a second season, so all the leads are already cast. I only cast like 4 new people.
Yeah.
And it felt like when I got to set, I really knew those ones, but I had to learn how to work with the leads because we didn't know each other. But it's also important for the actors in the casting room to know if they like working with you, and to know if they like to, or kind of know how you give notes or how you make them feel. Do you make them feel safe, invited, warm? How do you build on notes? Do you give them notes? Stuff like that. So for me, casting is like building that rapport, building that relationship. Every single character matters to me, however big or small the part is. I will treat everyone. Everyone will get my time on set. Then once I get to set, it's it's so fast paced sometimes. Sometimes I've got to like block and rehearse at the same time, which is not ideal, but sometimes you have to, depending on that day. Then I like to really just go for one quite quickly, because then everyone's nerves drop. They've done the first take, the cameras have rolled, everything's whatever. Okay, now we can tweak a few things visually that didn't look quite right on the monitor, and whilst that's happening, I can go in to each person, and I like to do it quite quietly and intimately with them if it's only for them. If it's about everyone's performance together, I will bring everyone together. Maybe we'll run lines again, then we're ready to go. But I won't give a note just to give a note and then I've made it their performance worse. I like to give notes that are concise and clear and helps the story. I think one thing as a director that you need to have is you need to have the story in your head at all times. You need to know what happened before, what happened after, where the character's going in the next set of scripts that you're not directing, because you are building them up for those. And sometimes actors can be quite in that one scene.
Yeah.
So sometimes your note is about, this is great, but remember this happens then. So we need to pull back a bit here, or we need to, remember that this happens or that happens, or you've just come from that place. Sometimes it's as simple as just knowing the story, because they will ask you questions all day long.
Yes.
All day long, they will ask you questions, and it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm going to find out. I think just having like quite an honest communication is really important. But luckily for Queenie, I had read all the scripts before we started filming, and on some projects, block 2 scripts are not ready by the time you started filming block 1. But luckily on Queenie, I knew exactly where it was going.
Excellent. Great tips there. Wow, I'm definitely yes. I mean, I think the this thing about inheriting cast is such an interesting thing about. But I am, from my experience, I think actors don't really think of it in that way. I think we think of it in that way.
Yeah.
Cast them, but they see you as the person, the cavalry, who's going to be their guide and help them, whether you've cast them or not. They're not even that aware of who's cast them, I think. So I would say to directors who are doing blocks 2 or 3, whatever, is don't feel that the actors are thinking you've not had a say in their casting. I think their priorities are elsewhere by that point. They're just very excited actually about who's coming up to do that. That's the other thing, is quite often actors, because they do a lot of sort of sitting by the wardrobe trucks, whatever, it's kind of, do you know yet who's coming to do the next block or whatever? So I think they're genuinely, by the time they've finished a block with you, they're kind of ready to move on, somebody fresh. So they
want to, and they want to be directed. Actors want to be directed. So
they do. I gave my worst ever note. I will always regret, to an actor called Jonathan Bailey in a show in America last year. I mean, my worst ever note, and it was last year. He had to be upset. It was a breakup scene in a gay drama called Fellow Travelers. And I knew we would need tears in order to read that he was upset. And he wasn't doing it. So I sort of, it was at night, everyone was very tired, like 1 a.m. in the morning. And I said, Jonathan, we need to feel it more. So what I'm doing everything. I said, no, but we're not seeing. And he went, that is not helpful.
Oh
All of a sudden,
no.
pressure onto him is now you want me to cry like on cue. And
Mm,
now knowing that, it's going to be so much harder for me to do that. And I just
mm.
realized it was like a terrible note. So you're never too late to learn. I'm definitely, yeah. How you phrase the notes are so critical that they're not directing them to do it this way. It's giving them emotional motivation,
Absolutely.
find it for themselves, which they will do once they know what your question is. And I think that you can be too precise.
If you
With
if
that,
you
hmm,
if you can give a note to an actor that makes the actor feel like it's come from them,
yes,
then you are onto a great performance, because that way they own it and they don't feel like they've just been given this note and it's just like an adjective or do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
be
yeah,
more scared. And then it's like,
yeah,
but why am I
yeah,
scared?
yeah, yeah.
It's like you said, it's helping them reach for it.
It can be as vague as I just need to feel it more. And
Exactly.
they go, well, the actor, yeah, so what am I doing that's not making him feel it? And you leave it to them to interpret. So
Yep.
sort of, yeah, it's a bit like you were saying, Aisha, about cast directors coming into casting and being too precise. It sort of shuts down avenues that they may have explored with you because you've been too much like. I think it was so useful what you said, Aisha, about directors almost feeling they need to somehow validate their presence in the room, speak too
Mm,
much and be too
mm.
present. But actually, it's not about you at that point. It's only about them and what they can show you. So I think that's great. And in terms of creating safe spaces, Joelle, for actors, that's also very important, isn't it? So
Yeah.
they feel secure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like on Queenie, for example, we had so many intimate scenes. So it was
Yeah.
something that was spoken about even before casting, throughout casting. Intimacy coordinator brought on quite early. Conversations with her. I have the process with those kind of scenes was that Dionne and whoever was in the scene with her would have a conversation with the intimacy coordinator first without me, because sometimes they don't want to say to a director, I don't want to do this or I don't want to do that. Just things like that, just making sure that there were people and kind of spaces that they could voice themselves
Mm.
safely and know that I'm also, for example, if Dionne didn't want to do a uh certain way we've choreographed a sex scene because the camera was going to be really close, I'll just be like, I don't have to shoot that way. I can shoot this way or that way or whatever, because I'm confident that I've got another idea in my head that doesn't compromise the actor and still looks great. I think if you as a director can get very stuck on like, this is the direction, this is the shot, there's nothing else I want to do, that to me could create an unsafe space for actors,
Mm.
because it means they don't have a say. They don't have a say on how they're being filmed, how they're performing, what's comfortable to them, what's not comfortable. And you won't get a great performance out of them if you leave them out of the conversation, because you'll see it on screen.
Mm.
When they're in the conversation, you're like, and you can, like, I can always see if someone looks nervous or like they're not, because they can see cameras being set up and stuff all the time. And I can see, and sometimes I'm like, are you all right? Do you want to talk? And they'll be like, well, I'm not really sure about this, this, and this. And I'll explain it. Sometimes that's fine. Or sometimes it's like, we got to tweak it. But I'd rather have that conversation before we start shooting than put someone in a compromising position, whatever the scene is.
And for you, Aisha, that what's in the script, moments like that are in the script. Are you flagging those perhaps to actors who are coming forward that you think you obviously some of these actors you know quite well and you know where their sensibilities may even lie. I don't know. How do you work through those intimate moments? Or there's it doesn't have to be intimate, it can be violence, it can be all kinds of triggering things for an actor to read, maybe perform in the casting session, and then maybe when they're cast to act in front of the cameras. That process of sensitive and difficult material, is that something, do you feel that casting agents have also got on board more carefully now in terms of making sure those things are
I think definitely, like, as the casting director, it's part of your job from the beginning, because also you don't want to put people forward and go on a journey, and the director and producer and team fall in love with someone who, for whatever reason, just doesn't feel comfortable with in the role. So from the very initial sort of breakdown, you're writing this project, you know, has nudity, or it has, you know, violent scenes, or it deals with difficult subjects, or whatever it is, and then, you know, checking in properly, saying, have you read the material? Are you happy to proceed before you come in? Like, is this something, like, you can come in and we can discuss it. It doesn't mean you have to do it in the way that it's here. Maybe there is a way, and maybe they will be open to doing it in a different way. But from the beginning, let's start having that conversation about whether this is something that you find appropriate or not appropriate. And Queenie does go through some difficult moments, and because of that, you know, sort of starts to become very sexually active. And so there were some people who just, that wasn't for them. That's not what they wanted to do. That's not what they felt comfortable doing. And that's absolutely fine. But we had to have that conversation from the beginning, and also explain to people that that does not mean that we will not cast you again, or we think that you're difficult, or everyone's allowed to sort of like the material that they like and feel comfortable in their job. So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because yes, I had it from a gay perspective, because I did a drama called Lost Boys and Fairies, and we'd already cast a gay actor, but so we were a bit more at liberty to look for a straight actor for the other role. And some of the straight actors they just said, I'm not comfortable kissing another man, you know, and it was like, okay, well then you're not right for the show, but thank you for letting us know. So, you know, you're right, you do need to flag these things up, because people do have sensitivities, and you're only fair to them and fair to everybody in the process, really, to only see people who have sort of feel safe and content with the material. I think it's really great. And as we know, until the recent past, people were led down not those routes, and were unpleasantly surprised to find that they were being asked to do things both in audition, but then also maybe not in audition, only when they're on set. So it's great. It's important that directors listening to this realize that this is now going to be part of the process, that all actors that you see will have probably be familiar with the material. I think that's really important. And in terms of you, Aisha, after actors have been cast in the role, do you exit the process at this point, and the next thing you do is you see the finished article, or do you stay in touch with the production team, with the actors? How does that work behind the director's back, if you like, but importantly, you know?
You can go for a set visit, but that's kind of it. It's sort of like you go to a wrap party, and everyone, the cast and the crew, they've built this sort of relationship. It's like you started off at the beginning of this project, and then everyone went off to summer camp and you didn't go. And then
Oh
you
no!
attend at the end, and you're just like, oh my God, everyone's, and only the cast will like come up and sort of wave and say hello, and you'll be like, how was it for you guys? But
Yes.
that's it. That's the job. And then
You're
you
like the
move
mother
on.
hen who brought them all together, and then they've all gone off, and then
So
they've...
the read through for me is like the sort of end rather than the
Yeah, yeah. But then when and presumably you have a lot of your heart's probably in your mouth a little bit, watching the final product, and whether all these risks, because they're all risks, you know, whether that's paid off.
I think there's something really wonderful about my job, because then you just get to sort of like it's theirs, it's for everyone to sort of go and make, and then you really get to watch it like something in a way that you didn't work on. You sort of like revisit it, and you're like, oh, that's what that was. And you know, and sometimes it's not what you thought it was, and even better, or just different, or just, but it's sort of like really lovely, actually.
Lovely. And Joelle, for you, if there's one thing you've learned, because hopefully every job allows you to grow, you know, as a director, as a human being, but as a director, what would be the thing that you took from Queenie that you now, with a bit of history, if you like, a bit of space between Queenie and your current project or the next project, what would it be, do you think?
I think Queenie is the job where I really learned how I work with actors, because it was my second TV job. The first one, I felt like I was still like learning, like I hadn't found my feet exactly yet. And then Queenie, I feel like because I never really knew how to do it. I'm just go by instinct, and so I really learned how to work with actors in a way that I now take with me everywhere. So I took it with me to the next job and had a wonderful time. The other thing is to like also find joy on set as much as possible, because you are away from your family. Even if you're filming in London and you live in London, you're still spending the majority of your day with that cast and crew, 12 hours a day. Sometimes you're not making it home to put your child in bed. It's a lot of time away from friends and family. And it's very stressful that you have to find the joy in it. Even if you come to one day and nothing is going to plan, you've got to find something that makes your day feel better, because it's got to be worth it. Right. I know maybe you're getting paid well and stuff, but it's a lot of time away from people that you love. So I took that away from that job because there were some very stressful days, and it was mainly like because there was not enough time to shoot it. So I took that with me to my next job, and although there was the same stress, the same problems, time versus money versus incomplete scripts, I had a wonderful time because I changed my mindset. I was like,
That's interesting. You changed your mindset. What, in what way did you change your mindset?
I was just a bit more malleable, a bit more malleable.
A bit more like just ride it.
Yeah, I was just a
Don't
bit
try and
more like
force it.
water. I was just like, okay, that's not what I wanted to happen, but it's happened. I'm going to be expected to shoot this to the best of my abilities and work with these actors as the best of my abilities. So I just have to go with it, because otherwise you bring that stress home and it affects people that have nothing to do with the job. So I've learned actually my mindset more than anything from Queenie onwards is different and more intact.
Difficult to do, and I'm impressed. I'm impressed because I think safeguarding yourself.
Yeah.
I think directors, whether it be in the casting process or the shooting process and the editing process, is they feel they have to give everything the whole time.
Yeah.
They're sort of expected to do that, but
Like you can't even turn your phone off when you get
no, and there's no
home.
one really looking out. The producer a little bit out for you, but
But it's not urgent, is it?
no.
It's not urgent. On my job after Queenie, I remember saying very early, I was like, when we shoot, most of the days we wrapped at 6, I said, we wrap at 6, I am gone. I am going straight home. I said, and then that time is for my daughter after that. And I said, if actors or producers or anyone wants to have a meeting with me, I will come to set early, but I won't stay afterwards. And it was just like, fine.
Yeah, and we had a producer, and this was brilliant, on Lost Boys and Fairies in Wales, amazing producer called Adam Knopp. And he just said, no emails at weekends. To put it on to arrive at 8 a.m. on Monday, it will be fine.
Great.
And that safe space of the weekend, it was just great. There's nothing interrupted. So we've slightly gone off casting, and for you, Aisha, on the casting, what do you learn from watching other directors do it? Do you also think, oh, that brought out something that I wasn't anticipating because of how the director was?
Yeah, completely. I mean, on this project, I really appreciated how Joelle communicated with the actors, her way of her process. Like she is sort of like really warm, felt like she championed them, and it really got great performances from them. But by also just giving them a lot of space. And I haven't seen that a lot before, being like, what do you want to do with the material? But they actually felt really comfortable to then articulate themselves because sometimes they can feel like that's a test.
Yeah.
But from her approach, they didn't feel like that at all. So that was really lovely.
And what would you say in terms of, just for you, Aisha, in terms of you sort of I thought it was very, very interesting what you said about poor auditioning, directors who've done it poorly, and you spoke about over explaining and taking too long, because that skill of what Joelle has within the time frame of seeing 10 actors, let's say, in a day is quite a skill. Was that something again that Joelle, because you can do that and go 1 hour over, but that's frowned upon, if you like. So there's also, isn't there, there's a thing of doing it somehow in a kind of quite a kind of time capsule of people not falling behind, so they're waiting a long time for their audition. Would you say also that's part of somehow that skill being combined with keeping things to schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of my job, though. I always say to directors, you spend as much time as you want to with the actors. I don't want them to leave, and you feel like you haven't got enough from them. But I do feel that sometimes there are people who quite quickly you can understand are really good actors, but may not be that role once they've come in the room. So maybe we should spend less time with those people. Still be nice, still make it feel like they've, had a good full experience and done a take or two. And that's not anything that they've done wrong, but let's spend a little bit less time with them and stop being so polite, and a little bit more time with the people who you actually feel are right for the role.
Absolutely key. Absolutely key is no one's expecting you to give equal share. That if somebody comes into the room and they're clearly not right, they just do the performance. It's it's not their fault. They're just not ever going to be the role. Give them 2 shots of it, I would say, and then move on, because somebody's going to come in who will excite you, and you will need more time for them. And so don't feel bad about it. Actors, they do quite a lot of auditions, so they are quite used not to being pushed out the door, but sort of they know that they're being moved on. And I think it's only fair to those who will need the extra TLC to make sure that you've got time in the day for them. And also, I would say not to panic that that you've got 5 people playing a role one day. It's honing down the character so that the casting agent is also getting more aware of what you're looking for. And don't be frustrated if on a given day no one's right, because actually that's also part of the process of finding who will be right. And it's so exciting then when you've done an extra set of auditions and that person pops, and you're like, we on Lost Boys and Fairies, we had 2 male leads, Sean and Fra Fee, and Fra's tape audition was so perfect. We never saw anybody else, and it was like, wow, that was easy, and it was much, much harder to find the Sean role because I had to speak Welsh. So that was quite, limited our pool somehow. But the idea was not to panic, but it was very interesting how, again, everybody had slightly different views on some of the other roles, but it was clear that Fra Fee was perfect to play the role of Andy. So it's just waiting for gold to strike. So I think I want to say a huge thank you to Joelle and to Aisha, and obviously to Dionne, who can't be with us now. It's been, for me, I've learned so much. I'm going to take that away. And for sharing so much of your insights. It's absolutely fascinating. And Sean, I don't know if you've got anything you want to say before we finish?
Yeah, just really echoing. I mean, thank you all, Joelle, Aisha, Dionne, of course, who was with us earlier, and you, James, for being such a fantastic host. There were some real great insights there, not just to the industry and the craft, but some real life lessons there and some great stuff about working practices too. So really, really appreciate you all sharing those with us. Thank you massively to Sophie and the CDG as well for being great collaborators on this. I'm sure it's the start of many more things that we'll be doing together, and a great partnership going forward. I also want to thank Sarah at Further South Productions and Lionsgate, as well as Luke and Jacob at the Artist Partnership as well. And of course, to my manager, Andrea, for her continued support as well with everything. Everyone has a good night, and we'll see you again shortly. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well,
Thank
take
you.
care, everyone. Have a
Bye.
great weekend as well.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
This podcast was recorded at a Directors UK member event. You can hear plenty more directors in conversation by subscribing on the usual streaming platforms. Follow us on social media and find out more about us at directors.uk.com.